the return on investment isn't much because they're only putting up a little bit of money and only getting a little bit of equity. So I thought it was very interesting. The first time I see a university where they're doing follow-up Series A and later stage funding, which I think is important because so we hear that the universities are like, well, we just want to do good, we want to help the society and all that, but when the university gets the benefit from that, you take that money and you roll it back into the facilities and stuff like that, which is a multiplier effect too. So that's really important. What was around the decision to? Was there an investment group that a capital innovation fund that came to the university suggested this? Did you come up with that? What was the decision or the impetus to start doing that program?
Yeah, so that's quite a complex question, and it's certainly something that we came to later in the maturity of the organisation. But the decision was entirely Cambridge Enterprises, and as I was saying this morning, that was because really I think we and the founder inventors of Solexa felt that we got burnt pretty badly by putting a very, very small amount in at the beginning of Solexa, and then that company going through serial dilution and then getting sold after 10 years for a lot of money. It would have been absolutely life-changing for the university and for the individual academics involved. But both the academics and ourselves had really been diluted out. I mean, we got a 2.5-fold uplift, but £250,000 is not a lot of money. For the academics, they ended up with, I don't know, a few million each, which, again, it wasn't life-changing for them, and it probably really should have been. I mean, I must say that both the academics have gone on to form new businesses. They're a lot more savvy this time. They ain't giving up any equity to anybody if they can possibly avoid it. But from our perspective, as you say, institutional investors don't like higher education institutions taking equity at the beginning, which they're not going to follow, because someone's got to pick up that slack. So one reason was that we wanted to follow our investment so that we were going to get a reasonable slice of the pie at the end. If we had Solexa again now, we could probably fund the company right to the point where it got bought. That amount of money would have been absolutely revolutionary for the university. The other point around that is that with Solexa, we saw sequential rounds of funding, we saw preference stacks developing, we saw some really typical hard-nosed venture capital decisions where they were getting multiples before the small guys like us and the inventors got anything at the end. And with our ability to follow our initial investment, we're very keen to make sure it's odds only. Everybody's only getting ordinary shares. It's going to be a fair split when the companies actually make it. So those are really the drivers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It's not just the money, but it's also the funding terms. So if you're able to have co-investment rights all the way through, at least not just to have the opportunity to invest, but you also require the negotiations to make sure they don't have a preferred equity that's senior to yours or anything like that. That you have to stay engaged all the way through.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we're very happy to try and protect everybody to do that. So, any other questions? Please. Well, this is going to be a really short session.
I'll ask another decision-making question. You said that Cambridge originally had professor's prerogative with the IP vested in the professor, and then you've changed to that it vested in the university.
Yes.
How did that change happen? What was the decision making and why did it go that way?
So I must say it was really complex. I think when back in the late 80s, up until the late 80s, intellectual property from universities was commercialized by an organization called British Technology Group. They'd been around since the 50s. They had a monopoly to commercialize all the technology coming out of universities. Similar system to, I think, happened in the US before Bayh-Dole. In the 80s, as part of the UK government's privatization of nationalised industries under the Thatcher administration, BTG was privatised, and that meant that they then had to give universities the opportunity to commercialise the intellectual property, because otherwise there was research funding going in to generate intellectual property which was being given to a private organisation. So that wouldn't satisfy the state aid rules. So they changed it to allow the universities to commercialise. At that stage, this was all really very new, and Cambridge didn't know what to do with it. So they decided, because Cambridge is such a democratic community of academics, run by and for the academics, they decided, well, we'll just let the academics keep it. And so that's how it started. And then, probably similar to the US experience, the research councils in the UK, so they're the people who are the equivalent of NIH and all the others in the US who fund university research. They said, if we're funding this with government central funding, then that intellectual property, again, because of the state aid rules, can't go on to benefit an individual. So at that point, the university had to change its IP policy, and it did so by saying, okay, we'll recognise the 1977 Patent Act, and the university will own the intellectual property. But by saying you, the academic, can choose whether you want to commercialise it, you still effectively have the same rights. And also from a tax perspective, that has helped us because we pay the commercialisation income that comes in from licensing a patent or commercialising any technology, that's distributed according to the revenue share. The bit that's going back to the academics, we pay them as if they were self-employed. So we say, we've got this money come in, send us an invoice, we'll send you the money, you send a tax return in at the end of the year and pay your income tax. We don't want anything to do with that. But we can only do that because the commercialisation is the decision, and that's where they're putting the effort in, and that's outside of their employment. If it were the university owns the intellectual property you create, then we'd have to pay them through PAYE, pay as you earn. So it's good for them, it's good for us, and it works really well. Anything else? No?
Just actually to follow up on that. So if the university owns the IP pretty much throughout, then if there's any infringement on the IP, it's the university that would actually defend the IP. Is that correct? Or
so yes, you'd be right there, but what actually happens is we get the universities to assign the IP to Cambridge Enterprise, so we will fight it. And then it also gives us all the rights to be able to license the intellectual property to all the licensees. So we collect up any rights that might be out there from the academics, the university, everybody else. We do a formal assignment document. We make sure we've got everything, we can pass it on. Anyone else? Come on, I know you're dying to ask a question. Good.
You're welcome. So obviously you don't have bidual because you are not in the US. And Cambridge Enterprises, from my memory, you do consulting work, or you facilitate consulting work by Cambridge faculty. If the consulting work should generate IP, does that ever, do the consulting clients ever own that IP, and how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, so we try to establish that consulting work is for immediate resolution of problems that the client has. They're paying a commercial premium to have the academics sort out that problem for them. Most of what the academics are going to be working on, okay, they're using their own knowledge and expertise, but it's solving a problem for a client. They're paying a commercial premium to do that. They own the intellectual property. But that makes the discussion around what the client wants, what the academics are able to do, the real point of contention. And sometimes there's a lot of education involved there, both with the academics or the clients, to say, do you know what this is going to mean as far as, you know, your right to anything going forward as an academic. And if you're using anything that you've spent many years researching and you're going to want to use that going forward, we need to make sure that the client is aware of what that is before they start shouting they own it. So yeah, you've got to be careful.
Can I
Yeah, of course.
follow up from that? So what I hear you saying is that the ownership of the IP created during the consultancy generally goes to the client, but you take care to both set a clear scope of work, so it's exactly clear what the faculty member is consulting on and what they're not consulting on, as well as clarifying just with your faculty member what the implications for their research program might be. And you don't reserve even like research only rights or something that's common in the US.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So thank you for that. That was very well put. Covered it better than I did. But yes, you're right. So we would have a standard research exemption, well, for both teaching and research, anything non-commercial, we would still retain the right to use that knowledge, information, intellectual property. So yeah, standard research exemption. So, but yes, essentially, background, we own ours, they own theirs, foreground, they own that. Who else? Yes.
After the investments, how can Cambridge help the companies grow? After you invest with them, I mean, you have any programs or anything that you help them to scale to the next level?
So scale up, I think, is one of our next challenges. One of the things that we want to address. Once we put some seed funding into a company, we will put one of our members of staff on the board. They will help the company to develop and grow to the next stage. when the next round of funding comes in, if that's someone from Cambridge Innovation Capital, they'll put someone on the board. So we will help the company in that way. We will also introduce them to other investors. Should they need other investors, help them, help form investment syndicates, those sort of things. We try to stay very close to the companies and make sure they are as successful as possible.
So you will invest probably, let's say 20% at first stage, because you said that someone from Cambridge will be on the board, right? So the investment might be substantial.
Yeah, it's probably going to be, I'm trying to think back through some of our recent investments, but I would think we were going to be up for at least 25%. I mean, more of our seed fund investments are now being syndicated. We're bringing in, bigger groups of investors even at a seed stage. But that depends on the technology. Sometimes nobody else wants it, But that's another interesting dilemma, because we have some members of our investment committees. So the way it works is we work up a proposal for investment. We put it in front of an investment committee there's up to 30 people can sit on that committee. They're entrepreneurs, people in various sectors that have made money in small companies, and they pretty much know what they're doing. We do a pitch, and we run that past them. Some of our investment committee will say, well, there's a huge syndicate here. They don't need our money. We're only putting in perhaps 10%. Now, the founders, the University of Cambridge founders, they want us to invest because they want the Cambridge name on it, because that, opens a lot of doors. From our perspective, we say, well, if we don't invest in some of the stuff that's got big syndicates, that's likely to make money very quickly, and we only invest in the stuff no one else wants to invest in, we're going to run out of money very quickly. So you have to have that sort of mixed model. We've got one particular member of the committee who is a very experienced academic. He's now retired, actually, but he has formed 3 companies over the last, say, 20, 25 years. He sold the first one to Microsoft. He sold the last one to Apple. He's now an Apple employee. And he has held very senior positions throughout the university. I think his last position was senior pro vice chancellor, so he was one below the vice chancellor. And he always says, well, they don't need us. We shouldn't be supporting them, And we say, well, give us a chance to get our money back at least, because we want the seed fund that we've got to be evergreen. We always want there to be some money in it that we can support new businesses with.
Hi. So can you share us your top 5 criteria you choose to invest in company?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Top 5 criteria.
When should you invest?
Yeah.
What is your criteria?
Oh, okay.
Top 5. Maybe I have a 10 list of them.
So, should we invest or not? I think it's very similar to should we commercialise the intellectual property or not? Does it look like a viable business opportunity in this case? Do we think there's a good chance of it working? Can we work with the individuals? Perhaps that's the bigger question when we're trying to form a business, because you're very much investing in the people, actually probably more than you're investing in the technology. Because if you invest in a business and the people aren't good, the business is going to go under. If you invest in a business where the technology doesn't work, but the people are really strong, they'll ditch the technology and they will find something else and the business will work. So, you know, it's more of a backing the people game, I think. But, you know, that said, we are, if we're licensing intellectual property into a new spin-out company, we're going to do that in a mixed license form. So we're going to say, instead of an upfront fee, we're going to take some equity, but we're also going to want to take a royalty on any products, should you ever make them. And in that way, we're covered both ways. We've got equity in the business, but we've also got some royalty on product sales. So that's not really a top 5, but it's people are the key. Yeah, absolutely. Making sure they have the business skills, recruiting in management to fill any of those holes, staying with them to make sure that the business is going to be viable for as long as we can.
Yes, so by taking the royalty, do you think at the latest stage, when you're going to get acquired by the big company, it's going to be a problem with them? Because for the big company, they don't like the company to get the royalty, right?
Well, it's a royalty. They've only got a license, so they've got really no choice. We can terminate a license.
Yeah, but it's going to be like, it's going to be there forever.
It's not usually a showstopper, because actually it's going to be a small amount of money. You're talking less than 5% on product sales.
Yeah, on the top line, right?
Yeah. So, you know, they'll absorb that.
I have a question about the spin-off company. It's like, just wonder that, because I heard that like for like UC Berkeley, she said that the professor can be in a company but cannot be a CTO, CEO. But what about the policy in UK?
So we've got no policy that says they can or can't. Effectively, if they want to be CEO, they could. But they have to be able to manage the rest of their employment with the university. So the university employment contract says, you know, you have to do the duties which are ascribed to you. Our academics are very busy. They've got teaching duties, research duties, departmental duties. Everyone in Cambridge is a member of a college. There's college duties. They've got duties to help with the REF. So the REF is the Research Excellence Framework. It's a government audit, essentially, of university research, which happens every 7 years. Everyone is responsible. You know, every 7 years, most universities develop fighting funds, which means the lesser academics, they're gone, and we're buying in the guys who are more successful because they're bringing their research and their papers with them. So, you know, it's very dog eat dog. So they need to be able to deliver what their employment contract demands of them. So actually what we find with the really senior academics, they don't want to leave the university. They've got to Cambridge. They've made it, thanks very much, as far as being an academic is concerned. They've probably, they're probably not paid that much, certainly not by US standards. But they've got college life and their academic life, and they're professor at University of Cambridge, so they're happy. So what usually happens there is that they take over the role of perhaps chief technology officer or scientific advisor or something like that. And what happens is that one of their group, usually a fairly senior postdoc, who's done 6 years as a postdoc, doesn't know where his next meal check's coming from, is then going to be, you know, an interim CEO, because they usually know the technology because they're one of the inventors. So they will take the business forward. And actually we find that's a really good way of getting our early career researchers into employment for the rest of their life, because we've got, as I said this morning, it's by modern standards, it's a small university. You know, there's 1,700 professors and lecturers. There's 5,000 postdocs. So these are early career researchers. 7% of them are going to go into an academic career. That's